Hi, everyone. Welcome to witness the beginnings of a 15-year-long friendship. Today, we are discussing The Forever War, which is the first book in the science fiction masterwork series. We are reading these one at a time, unless they are over 300 pages long, in which we consider breaking it up into multiple discussions. There are over 160 of these, so it's going to take us about 15 years to get through them. So, most long term friendships get to say, oh, can you believe it? We've been friends for so long. Today, we have the exclusive privilege of saying, can you believe it? We get to be friends for 15 years.
It's like the booktube community's version of Survivor, is it? 5 started. How many remain? Yeah.
None remain. And Chris had a joke last week about how at some point we might make a video about the divorce. So we'll still make content because every year we have to talk about what happened that one time.
That's true.
So with that, over to my friends. Jared, would you like to start us off with introductions?
Oh, hello everybody. I'm Jared. I have the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel. Kind of a weekend warrior thing for me, and I also haunt the page chewing forums, which is fun.
Is it me?
Yeah.
So my name is Susana, and I write weird fantasy.
And you have a channel?
Yes, I have a channel. It's a week old. Only has 2 videos. But yeah, it's called Den of the Weird.
Yes, go check it out. We had an awesome live stream on it, and I think Susana made a video recently as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Layla.
I'm Layla Koshi. I'm a reader and writer, and I have a site called Validity Magazine. Kind of been on hiatus during the summer, but got some things lined up for late August and fall. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to discussing this.
Nice.
And my name's Chris Moen. Sometimes booktubers, sometimes appear on other people's channels discussing great books, movies, whatever there is to discuss. And am I the only person that this is a reread for, or has anybody read this before?
I have not.
First time.
So this is a reread for me.
Nice.
Oh, okay.
And what I will say in general about that is my brain only thought that the book was about the last 30 pages. So my memory of the entire novel from start to finish, and how good it was, how bad it was all pretty much what was in the last 30 pages. Everything before that is sort of not there.
It does come together a lot in the last 30 pages. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And also when the action started in the last 30 pages, I was surprised because I didn't think there was enough room to wrap up everything that it said, but it worked. Yeah. What did everyone else think?
Well, first, I just wanted to say about the 15 years. I think if we use, if we used whatever that leap, I forget the terminology for it, but we could cover a lot of Earth years if we were having a discussion on one of the Taran planet or whatever. So, but I really liked how the futuristic topics he brought up, especially in the U.S., seem to. I mean, there's some correlations to discuss, and I really like that, which I know we can get into. But as a broad comment, I did think of The Expanse. I was comparing it to The Expanse, and I wondered if some nods to it were in The Expanse novels. And the only thing that kind of stuck out to me, whatever planet they first went out to, and I forget the name of it, but they said something about the sun being a dim light, but now we know if you even go past Saturn, the sun is like this little dot, so that was just a little thing, but otherwise I thought there's some very prescient situations and really fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the
I
strongest.
wonder.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just. I wonder how the author feels about getting so many things right. Um,
Yeah.
I worry how much we might still get right by the end of the decade. It
Yeah.
was quite a surprise for me. This book has been on my TBR for years and years, and I think it was the perfect moment, the perfect time to read it. I was not prepared. I thought it was something completely different. So yeah, really enjoy it.
Yeah, he I thought like the one of the biggest themes in the book was how he tied the big war into the economy and how that war was kind of needed to keep the economy going for such a long time. I mean, how many years was it? Thousands, right? Um,
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
and that was so relevant to not only the time he wrote it during Vietnam, but also today. Um, our military, even before Vietnam, our military industrial complex here in the United States is something that I see firsthand. I work kind of in the industry. My job works for the industry, and it's something that's almost self-perpetuating all the time. Like it feeds itself, and it just keeps going. And you wonder not only in the wars that the United States is involved in, but in all the wars that are going on the planet. This the war, the wars are that tied into the economies, and I thought that was the thing that he brought forth very strongly in this book.
It's interesting because this isn't when we were talking about these are classic sci-fi books. This is 1974. I mean, this is sort of a bit later than a lot of people envisage classic sci-fi to be. Yet it's still a couple of years after the moon landing. It's still pre-Voyager probe getting sent out into space. It finds this little window of time where not an awful lot of stuff has happened in terms of development of space technology, and yet, obviously, it's very much in the media and the news. And yet, he's taken a common event that he was party to, obviously the Vietnam War and his own experiences, and kind of tied those two and meshed them together and created, I would say, a strange book because I would say if you're a character-only reader, this is a book that will not really work for you because you have a main protagonist and a character that's one very bland grey. There's nothing exceptional about him aside from his high IQ that's given at the start of the fact they conscripted all these smart people in. And that also is somebody that has no effect on the world. Do you know what I mean? He exists in this one, he gets moved around from place to place, but no matter what he goes to do, he has literally no effect on the novel, or rather than to be a bystander and tell us about it. So in that case, you're not getting an awful lot of character development other than the chapters of his life as he makes his way up through ranks through basically no other reason than longevity. It's literally the only thing that happens there, but yet the book is still structured in terms of his military career from start to finish. And all of those things, I think, make for a really interesting premise with which to set the book. And then you put on, as Jared and a couple of others have said, these kind of big thematic ideas of science fiction of, right, if this thing was to happen, we would have a war that lasted centuries. What would be the long-term impacts of that? And I think not just in terms of economy, but in terms of family structure, sexuality especially is went into quite a lot and repeatedly through the book. Exactly what that would mean for our civilization, and really about the meaning of war. Then, what is the point of war in the big terms? And of course, I'm sure that's to me that's what the whole book is about. And I went back kind of for the first half, going, this book isn't as good as I thought it was, and then getting to the end and going, no, actually, it's much better than I thought it was, and a lot of those things that I've talked about.
Hmm. Yeah. I think the fact that he's not anyone significant makes it a more powerful story. Like it makes it a more powerful way to make the point that I think it's trying to make. It is he's just someone who's sort of buffeted around and has almost no control over anything that's happening. And towards the end also he goes back fully expecting to be re-enlisted, or whatever the word is, that to be sent back again to fight some more, and he's resigning himself to it. So and yeah, we'll talk about the end when we get to it, but even as a major we see he doesn't really have enough say in anything pretty much. So I think that made for really powerful storytelling, even though he wasn't a very interesting character. Though I thought he had some really good moments of humor. Yeah, yeah. Overall, I think that was a good way to tell the story.
What did you think about his, you know, the situation where either memories were implanted in their brains, false memories, or you know, when he did become, was it a major that he was the highest rank?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
that you know, he was almost totally brain, you know, he had this whole brain reconfiguration. Um, and I just wonder where are we with that? Do you feel like that's a comment on where media was going, or was that really a comment on where you know, military preparedness was going? You know, I was wondering if you think that's anything that's bearing out in real society now, since he seems to be so prescient.
Yeah, he definitely had a concern about government control over the population. Because there's mind control, like there's hypnosis, brain wipe, uh, sexual reorientation, and whatever else the government offered, offered in quotes to the citizens. Um, and so it was he brought up a lot of those points. I don't know if he really delved too deep into some of those. It was kind of a mention by the narrator that these things were happening, and you got to, like, as they went through the story, that what's the character Mandela, right? That's the
Mhm.
character's name.
Yeah.
Um, you you saw how he viewed some of these changes, but it never really delved too deep into how much control that government was forcing or coercing, or the population was just accepting part of it. There was a lot of questions up in the air as to whether how deep the involvement was. Um, I don't know how you guys felt about that.
This is my favorite thing about classic sci-fi in general, both in terms of this book and actually one of the books that's a couple of the ways down, which I read this year and I just thought was one of the greatest things I've ever had. All you have to do is plant the seed. You know, the idea that, okay, as Layla said there, they did this thing and he just tells you about it, but he doesn't leave the judgment as to what the reasons were for that or the impact of that is for yourself. It's just left for you, the reader, to speculate. And for me, that's way more fun than actually him telling me, because it leads very
Mhm.
much into these discussions and to say, go, well, what does it mean? Well, to me, I think if you go back to the start and have to say that they only recruited the people at the start who were 150 IQ plus. So they took these really smart, intelligent people at the start and basically threw them in a war, which you can talk about. I thought at the start that's a waste of life, a waste of intelligence progress on the planet itself. But then education itself has been reduced to these quick screening of either using VR technology or information dumps, where the route and path of learning is pointless. It doesn't feed the war. It doesn't help the war effort. All they need is people with skills and with people with knowledge, and they info dump it at them. And to
Mm.
kind of Layla's point, where she's talking about where does that actually lead, I think we are sort of in this ever increasing speeding train to this eventuality. Employers, whether it's military or otherwise, but even employers today, don't want people to go on a learning journey. They just want people with the skills and the skill set at the end of it, and they want them to get it quickly. And even people are very quick to go, I don't want to go through the journey. I just want to, can I do a 6 week course and I will know everything about the history of the universe? Put that on a banner and see how many people sign up to that. I mean, that's exactly where the information age is taking us now. There's no kind of development of skills. And it's sort of prescient because it obviously is the technology of the Matrix film. I remember reading that and going, I wonder if that was lifted straight from the book, or the idea, the kernel came from that, moved on to basically say you plug yourself in, and within a couple of hours you will have X Y and Z skills.
Mm.
But I thought it was more about the role of education within that modern society. For me, is the thing that I take away, and that education as an idea, there's no point anymore. It's not feeding the machine. It's not. We're not advancing society. It's about basically people will make the decisions for us, and we just need grunts on the ground, the action about.
Wow, I'm even having an epiphany here in regard to, AI and computer chips in the brain, everything else. Let's all go write a short story now about this. But yeah, I think, it's not exactly where we are, but I really think that point about how education happens and who they're selecting for, these journeys. It's all very, yeah, very
Yeah.
interesting.
I sorry. Yeah. Whether or not he intended to point to specific types of technology, we can point to counterparts. I think you mentioned media, Layla, as the thing that works into our brains and makes us think a certain way just by like hammering the point repeatedly over and over. And AI also, there's counterpoints to everything I think we can think of, even if Haldeman did not specifically think of those specific technologies. Yeah, you guys say prescient. I agree quite a
Yeah.
bit. There was one thing that we didn't see it, and I'm just curious more than anything else. There's not a lot of education, and all the smart people apparently are being sent off into space. So who's back home developing the space technology needed to improve what they need for the war, right? That feels like a bit of a disjointed thing that you still need to focus quite a bit on education to get people to um, what research and
Yeah.
fund the war efforts. But yeah, but the point was taken, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and they even talked about the idea that education was the last 18 years and the last six have been taken at home or in a community centre and kind of done
Mm,
distance learning. I mean, the idea that in 1974 somebody was writing a book about distance learning and kind of people
mm.
learning from home and things is sort of like,
Mm-hmm.
what? Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
This is a societal thing that he was talking about, not a technological thing necessarily, but he was talking about, in the future, this is probably what will happen. And he was talking about 2600, 2700 probably in terms of his book. But it
Mhm.
just goes to show you how the speed and advance of progress kind of bleeds out into society.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
there was one other
That's
thing.
the how it happened, in our society or in the books. It's not as important as why, the motivation about it.
Mm,
Why is it
That's right.
happening? Um, what did he see back then that probably we're only seeing now?
mm,
Uh, that's the sort of thing that I wondered, because it's so bizarre for me. Like if I'd read the book 25 years ago, I probably thought it was the most comical interpretation of the future. I think I would feel about the book very differently than what I feel now. I'm
Uh-huh.
not laughing. I'm just like, whoa,
mhm,
Yeah.
this guy was a genius to understand society and human nature so well that he could predict or imagine a world where this would happen. Yeah, so thumbs up.
Yeah, he obviously he influenced William Gibson, who wrote the Neuromancer novels, um, much later. But Gibson had a lot of that societal connection of kind of predicting the internet the way that he did. And I know he wrote about Haldeman in this book in particular as being an influence on some of his writing. Um, so it was there was that connection, yeah, with this, his future vision of how society could be connected in that manner.
mm,
And
Yeah.
to kind of Susanna's point, if we'd have read this 25 years ago, and I agree, I just wouldn't have got any of the kind of
Yeah.
nuance that it was pointing at you. But yeah, we've lived 25 years of being a taxpayer, of being somebody that's worked for various companies, that's been kind of been a cog in a machine. And yet Haldeman was basically a cog in the Vietnam War in the same way. He probably looked around the people that he was in and seen how humanity was a resource, or life was a resource, rather than necessarily valued or being used for any kind of future gain. It was very much about churning. We just need more bodies. And then,
Mm.
and kind of, even in that 4 or 5 year period, how he came out of that and went, oh, this is the direction of humanity. Like, he can see it in like a short space of time, whereas obviously we probably need a bit longer, because like an awful lot of people, when I was 20, 25, I thought the world was worked very differently than I do now, for
Mm.
instance. And certainly events of the world have influenced how we see that, etc. But yeah, I think it's all a nice microcosm of humanity's path for the next 100 years or whatever it is.
Yeah. I am recently rewatching a lot of somewhat older shows like Frasier, and I've been reading Conspirata by Robert Harris, the Cicero trilogy, in
Mm-hmm.
which he talks a lot about politics in ancient Rome. And what strikes me the most is that things aren't all that different; they were just different people. And I wonder, to Susana's point, if that's what it was. The society wasn't exactly how he wrote about it in this book, but maybe there were seeds or things he saw that he had a thought experiment and like blew it up to see what it would look like if this became a main event, for instance. Yeah, I think the most recent episode we saw in Frasier was there was an argument about politics that my husband and I very much related to, and that made sense even now, which is what 20 years later since the show was made, and the Cicero trilogy was even worse. It's been several millennia and it still hits home. So yeah, maybe it was all there, and so we agree with it because it's still here.
Very much agree.
Yeah,
Well,
it's something that um, Haldeman could have taken his experiences in Vietnam and be able to articulate that kind of vision from that experience. Just a few years later,
Mhm.
um, that's that's a powerful ability.
Mm.
Wish I had,
Yeah.
but
you
Yeah, it
know,
speaks to his. Sorry, go
oh,
ahead, Lil.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it speaks to his level of genius. Like, there was a guy who was just his life could have just been lost, just
Mm.
as part of a
Mhm.
war, a war effort. Just somebody was lost in very tragic circumstances through, again, no fault of his own. Yet you get something like really prescient and knowledgeable that has inspired thousands and thousands of
yeah,
writers and creators, etc., going forward. And that people are very much eulogized as being a very important work in and around that time, which is contained in what, 239 pages or something of a book. Like, it's
Right.
Yeah.
bizarre, and
Yeah.
and even within that, I would say I was surprised at the pro style, because it's very conversational a lot of the way through it. Again, I was expecting it to be a bit heavier in terms of reading style,
yeah,
but it's not. It's a very easy, straightforward read. Some might say it's a bit boring in places because of its sort of monotonous conversational nature, but I think within that you've got the interplay of everything else that's happening
Mm.
in the world and between the characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think these old books say a lot in very few pages. Sorry, Layla.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
That was everything. I
Yeah.
said.
Well, what occurred to me too. I know there's different opinions on the Wheel of Time, but Robert Jordan also was a Vietnam veteran. And
Mm.
so I did find myself making some broad comparisons again because, Robert Jordan was dealing with mental health with his main character, Rand. But what I really thought about was they both, and there is kind of a slight difference. Like this book was written in the mid 70s, early to mid 70s, and Robert Jordan took forever to write his books. But um, there's the issue of mental health, but more I kind of looked at both from how they portrayed women in combat situations or in, fight situations, and they both seem to be trying to give them agency. I think Haldeman was, for his time, giving them agency, but both seem to have this unusual uh, sexual assault issue in their books. And did you notice that Haldeman, like, I think the woman was drunk, and so there's kind of a did he or did he not take advantage of her? And there's a similar theme in The Wheel of Time with a character who actually it's a female character who takes advantage of, oh, what's his name? Rand's friend. I'll remember it in a moment. So they
Matt?
both
Matt or
portray
Perrin?
this. Matt, yes.
Matt.
I mean,
Matt.
it seems a humorous situation, but actually, if you think about it, it's not that humorous, because Matt was trapped. But so I was kind of drawing comparisons there between these two folks. And but I guess my question to you would be about women's portrayal and agency in the books. And I think overall he did well, but I wonder what you all think.
Yeah. Well, he had that line in there
I,
about women had to be compliant and promiscuous by custom
he made
and
it
law.
clear that they were compliant and
Yeah.
implicit, and it was mandatory. And it wasn't just the women; everyone was kind of forced to sleep with each other at the beginning. Which, if you think about it, it's playing the devil's advocate here. It's a very good way if you're gonna have men and women in such close quarters and combat situation. It's a great way to get rid of sexual tension, of jealousy, of possession. It's of office romances, forbidden romances. Because all that is a distraction, and it's still a way to keep everyone sexually happy. So not to add to the stress and the frustration of the situation. So within the context, and since everyone seems to have signed up for it, and there was no one actually being abused, even though those poor women in the other planet, there were just a few of them. I felt sorry for them. But anyway, I guess I didn't see it as rape. Just see it as something that you just have to deal with, perhaps even enjoy. But it matched the situation. As the Wheel of Time, I thought it was funny, all the whole chapter with Matt, because he was such a
Because he is
womanizer in
kind
his
of
own way. I think he deserved the taste of his poison just a little bit.
yeah,
He
that's
was
what,
being abused. He was fine.
yeah, because he definitely had, put it out there too. He definitely
Mm-hmm. He
always
was no
treated
saint.
women.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but they both tried to deal with it. And Haldeman, was just like everything else he's portraying. Is he just putting it out there for us to evaluate, versus endorsing, a way of being. So,
Well, I wonder how much of what he saw in Vietnam influenced his his portrayal of the military with men and women in it, because you didn't have women in Vietnam combat. So I'm wondering how much of that, influenced that, and what he saw there that made him portray it in that manner.
I sort of read this whole book the second time going, I want to see the evidence that this was written in 1974 somewhere on the page, if you know what I mean, whether it was attitudes to females in the military, whether it was attitudes to sexuality. And every time I kind of thought, yes, well, there's a classic representation of outdated attitudes. He would use it in another way further down the line. I mean, one, the fact that there were lots of females present within the military in different roles kind of said of a progression that actually understood that was going to be the direction of travel there. And then about how then treated all of sexuality as like one small thing at the start, like you say the compliance, etc. at the start, but then how that became actually everything about going into the homo sex and the fact that one sense and relationships and sex were actually seen as an unnecessary complication in war. And then fast forward to when he's the major, when he's very in the sexually frustrated phase, when he can't control his anger, his temper, all of his hormones, and actually how he realizes that the lack of relationship at that stage was hindering his ability to lead and do all and operate within a work context. So he kind of wrapped it all
Full
around.
circle, yeah.
It was full circle,
Yeah.
and he kind of used it a lot of times rather than just kind of simply stating at one time, oh, this is what happened right now. He just kind of kept on looping back around it and kind of going, well, here we are 100 years later, and this is what attitudes are to now. And, you know, like so clever and so well thought out and not representative of 1974, which I sort of was hoping for the whole time, that it would find something to kind of go, you see, you know, even the idea of a homosexual, when he says, oh, I'm very open to that, and the guy in the psychophile report says, well, yeah, you appear to be, which is kind of what we as the reader have been looking up, as he's been making these sort of veiled comments about homosexuality the whole way through the book, in which he thinks that he's been very open and acceptable, but we as the reader are kind of going, well, yes, but you're also very prejudiced and judgmental at the same time because of it. So like, all of that stuff's so rich.
Yeah.
Yeah. A great detail.
Yeah.
I think the line that you mentioned, Jared, I did have a knee-jerk reaction to that. But then also in the very beginning of the book, we are told that women ask the men and they almost have to say yes. So I kind of read that as just something he said, maybe to explain to us that, you know, women might tend to be judged, but they are required to be promiscuous, but maybe the men are too, and we didn't read about it. Like, that's how I dissipated my anger at that line, but mostly but also I really agree with what you said, Chris. He really played with that theme. And again, there are many places where one can potentially have knee-jerk reactions and say, oh no, this character is homophobic, so the author must be homophobic. But really, it's the character, and the rest of the world, it's okay. So we're just seeing a reaction to that, which may or may not match with the readers, and we may have our own opinion about it. But I think it's still very suited to our time. It's not that he's representing a person who isn't quite open to it for many reasons, because he's been gone for centuries and things have changed a lot, but also could be representative of, you know, people who just don't like things changing on them. So yeah, there's a lot there that you could get angry about, because it feels like something that you shouldn't say in today's day and time, but it's just a character saying something. And if you read the rest of the world, it's not the author saying those things. Yeah.
That's what I thought was great.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, what I thought was great was that, you know, he was going through time, you know, forward, and it really, I love the details of how just these little things helped us realize, you know, that great leaps of time have happened, whether having to catch up on the politics, but one was where his reports, people who were reporting to him had to learn his dialect, you know, because it was an older dialect. And I just thought, how cool is that? You know? I wouldn't want to be in a position of having to learn a dialect, but I thought it was just really cool the way he represented that in the book.
Or even to think it would be a thing. I mean, you look how many dialects and words and phrases and things that have appeared into life in 50 years from 1974 till now, to the point that the Gen Z, Gen X kind of generation, they are almost hard to understand, especially in written form. You know, in terms of language, even the close proximity that we have, even as the parents. You know,
well, I would say his military experience ties into that as well, because I remember going to basic training and barely understanding half the guys that were in my room, because they're from all parts of different parts of the country, and you have a lot of accents. You know, my accent's been pointed out before on this channel, and you had people from all over the place, and so I wonder if that played into his his knowledge of of how dialects change over the years, and people's accents change, and the language changes. That's
That's a great point.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we also saw how that alienated him from, like, there were many reasons why he was different and alienated by the rest of his company, and or strike force, is that what they were called? uh, and language was one of them. He wasn't able to communicate with them. I think that is a really big deal, because I mean, maybe not in the US so much, but I know in India, language is a very great part of identity. So if you're not able to communicate to people in their language, or if you're able to talk to people in their language, even if it's really broken versions of it, they'll immediately relate to you. And um, so, the fact that he's not, that they speak his language but he doesn't, maybe that also potentially contributed to their lack of a good relationship. That, yeah.
Or even the idea that everybody had to learn his dialect and he didn't have
Yeah.
to learn theirs because of his seniority is
Hmm.
kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Yeah.
There was one
Another.
saying that it was kind of hard to believe. Oh, sorry. Saying there was one thing that was kind of hard to believe for me, but I guess that would be a completely different story. Was how little people actually cared that he was so old, or that he lived in a different era. It was so natural for them. You would expect that, people would just ask him stuff about how things used to be, or just a little bit more curiosity. So either they learned all of it, or they didn't care. I mean, again, it would be a completely different story. That was not what the book and the characters were focused. But I think it was a missed opportunity there, just now and again, to have someone show some interest. I don't know,
Yeah, you have this
just a thought.
whole time dilation thing going on,
Hmm.
and I I didn't think he really engaged that much at all, compared to some of the other stuff that he delved into in this book. Yes, I noticed that too. That it was just it was kind of glossed over a bit, that part of it. I mean, it was only, like Chris said, it's a short book, so how much you gonna throw in there? But
Oh, we lost Layla.
Oh, okay.
No?
Well, interestingly, I think he sort of does deal with it a little bit because I actually think one of the very biggest ideas that's in this book is, around population control, right? And how the population of Earth was fluctuating up and down. And they got to a stage where procreation was basically outlawed. It was seen as no longer a thing. They wanted to cap the population at 1 billion and they basically grew babies in order to generate population, right? Which in its own right within a paragraph is kind of one thing. But what that actually means for society is that the family unit no longer exists.
Mm.
Relationships aren't there. There is not an idea that anybody would be in a current nurturing relationship where you would even ask after other people. Your interrelations with people, the heterosexual and the homosexual relationships are all just, it's all sort of seen as an unnecessary thing within life other than for release or otherwise. So if there is no family unit, there is no nurturing going on anymore, and very much again you're just a resource within the world, then your idea of asking after the next person maybe doesn't happen. Where does that come from? Where does the conversational nature of
True.
society where you grow
Good point.
all come from? And
Yeah.
for me that was the bit that kind
That's
of went, oh wow.
Yeah.
that's a big intuitive leap on
Yeah.
your part there,
Hmm.
Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good
It's
point.
because like Susana said, it was very quick, um, and so there's a lot to cover there as far as societal changes and stuff like that, and it is done very, very quickly in the book. Because as even that short sentence you just said, there's a whole bunch to unpack there. Yeah.
And I think that's why this is a book that gets read by people again and again and again and again, because every time they go to it, I mean, well, if that happened, then that would mean X, Y, and Z, coming forward. That isn't just a thing in its own right. And again, as a sci-fi writer, probably of the time, and even now, when people were writing shorter books, I think they were respecting the intelligence of the reader to kind of say, rather than me telling you the outcome of this, actually you can theorize to what the outcomes is, because that makes far more interesting conversation and unpacking of my book than me spending another 100 pages of it. You know, I could put another 100 pages of it in, but it's way more interesting without that, I think, rather than actually putting it in, because as Susana quite said, it wasn't that book. That wasn't the purpose of the story. These are all just other things that are happening alongside.
Yeah, yeah. And I wonder, in addition, they said something about schools, right? Or after a certain age, they are kept in group, and then after a certain age, they leave. So uh, I assume the school or equivalent organization teaches everyone the same thing in this world. So it's just an extremely indoctrinated society that all believes the same thing and is very certain of their beliefs. They don't have um, counterpoints or different opinions to debate and have different opinions on. So maybe there's the sum total of their opinion is you're deviant, you're from the past, but we'll tolerate it because we have to. And that's it. And really, they don't tolerate it all that much, as we see towards the end. So, yeah, I think, yeah, that's a great point, Chris. I wonder if there's further consequences of that as well.
But didn't they create a whole different planet to put people that
Yeah.
had the different viewpoint or whatever?
Yeah, exactly right. So the segregated it, yeah.
Is that, you know,
That's one way to do it, but so far you only have one planet.
right?
You know.
I'm not sure how I feel about that, because then you have almost a segregation. You know? It's,
But did you not read that and go, especially because at the time he was looking for home. He was looking for somewhere to be home, and he couldn't integrate into normal society. You kind of felt, well, at least there is somewhere for him to go. And even the first time, when he does return to Earth the first time, you see that society is completely broken down there as well. I mean, the only place that looked at it had a bit of society were those groups of people that were relying on each other for free food. You know, when they were building the ration farms, they seemed like they had a bit of society. And obviously, it ended in tragic circumstances. For went through like this highly effective action scene, I think probably more than any of the other action scenes in the book. I think that one really knocked the most home for me in terms of that was happening on Earth in a place that was supposed to be the war was supposed to be protecting. You know, we were supposed to be fighting for those ideals, and like all society was just in pieces. People, you know, didn't have credit or money anymore. There were currency was calories. I thought, what a genius idea, you know. And to have as a construct, like just so clever.
Yeah. That was funny and clever.
Yes, yeah.
It made me laugh quite a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really clever as well.
yeah, it raises a lot of questions about, you know, the what we believe money is, and you know what and how it's all tied into our societies and stuff like that. The fiction of money, if you will.
Especially for these people for whom money meant nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, these people were accruing salary over this period of time, coming back to vast, enormous wealth, but actually they were just spending half their money on like a week's worth of groceries, you know, because inflation had just taken off that stage. And it does beg the question of, in a world where, you know, we have a planet full of resources, etc., what are the important resources? Because obviously, you know, in terms of like in our world at the moment, oil is a very precious resource, etc. But if there was no water anymore, or people were hoarding water, oil would mean nothing. You know what I mean? You know, it's not actually supporting life or anything. So it does make you think about what the important resources that we have and where we fund our time and energy and money into.
Yeah.
That's what I mean with how much more he might have got right by the end of the decade.
Yeah, for sure.
Going like this.
Yeah, the guns were scary. That you could buy a gun at a mall. That was vaguely terrifying. But apparently they also had improvements in medicine to fix gunshot wounds. So if it does happen in our world, hopefully both of those go together. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, as a question, how did everybody find the science of the book?
I was very happy with
That it only explained what it needed to, because any more explanation would just fall apart, and you
Yeah,
still
yeah.
have to go from the beginning with a very open mind and say, okay, so this happened. That's the premise. Fine. You don't need to explain it. I don't want to know. Tell me how it works, and I'll go with it. So it was very clever, very fast, and no need for a huge world building. I appreciate that. To just fill in the blanks with your imagination, and that's fine.
I found myself even just going very quickly through the little he did explain. I was like, okay, all right, let me get to the other stuff. I'm not a big fan of pseudo science techno speak myself, so it doesn't appeal to me. So I kind of just sped read through those parts.
I thought, I mean, I don't know enough about relativity to say one way or the other, but I think a lot of the things that he did explain are actual science, not so much pseudoscience. But there were some things that I think the more biology and other non-physics sciences, maybe those were a little made up, perhaps. And he did have. He didn't do any AI, but he did do some biology. He talked about some evolutionary science also, I think, from other planets. And yeah, there is an interesting point he makes towards the end that I'd like to talk about. But in terms of the science, I thought, yeah, I love reading science fiction for the science, and I thought the bits in this were very well done. They made me. I don't know. There's something about science fiction books that makes me think about them constantly and imagine the stars all the time. I don't know why that is. And this book, it took very little of getting into it to make me want to keep coming back to it for that reason.
I'm very much one of those people that likes a bit of science, but if the science is going to be there, it's got to at least be factually work. It has to be correct. And the relativity, as you said, he kind of talks very limitedly about, but he is right and it is true. Whether those numbers, I don't know whether he run the numbers through the relativity formula or not, but in terms of time scales, etc., and the distances that was all right. But there was a couple of other nice things that I thought were, again, here's a book indicative of 1974. So and it did make me go to Google. So they talked about the people that have been tested. Do you remember the people that had died at the start because they were kind of highly sensitive to ESP? Basically, their ESP was very high, and they said they were Rhine tested. Now, I didn't know this, but Rhine was the guy who was the scientist at the late 60s who was doing the work in that. And obviously, Haldeman had postulated that it would be called the Rhine test because that's who the scientist was at the time and kind of pulled it forward, whereas we call it now kind of ESP testing and extrasensory perception. And then even the things about the force gloves that they were using, about how they worked in the logarithmic scale of how force would kind of multiply up and stuff. I was like, this stuff's all really cool. Like I can see how this is as a construct can give me some ability to do in times of storytelling when they get stuck in the ground, for instance, they be saying, well, just dig with your hands. And of course, because your hands, your gloves are actually these powered machines at the moment. These can kind of dig massive, like basically big diggers in your hands. And if they had realized it soon enough. So a lot of that stuff was, like, in terms of physics anyway, I thought was just like, sort of delicious the whole way through it. I was like, yeah, this is real. Yeah. This is really meaty and nice, and it makes me go and investigate little bits of it to say, I want to understand a bit more about that, or understand a bit less about that, maybe. And the biology is, as Varsha correctly says, there's quite a lot of that towards the end of the book.
Layla, I don't know if you can hear us. Do you have an opinion on the science in the book?
Mostly, I had questions. I wasn't sure. I would say, like I said, the distance between the sun and the planet beyond Pluto, that was a little thing. And really the way time was described, I don't know. It sounds like you all may have been discussing that or relativity, but
we didn't talk about it in detail. But
but I wondered how accurate that was, or if he was even in the ballpark of how time would move relative to where you are. And I think there is something to it, and maybe he just stretched it a bit, because they do say, like when you fly on a plane, on a jet, that there'll be a very slight difference between a clock where you originated from and your own timepiece on the jet, so maybe something to that. Yeah, but those
Yeah.
are the only ones I can think of. Of course, the regrowing of the limbs I thought was really cool.
Yeah, that would be cool technology
Yeah,
to have.
Yeah.
It reminded me of
yeah,
Skelly Grow in Harry Potter. I wonder if
yeah.
she had the idea from this book. um, I was gonna say something. Oh, I watched a video. I think it was PBS Science or something, in which they talked about whether a photon, if something moves at the speed of light, whether it experiences time or not,
Avatar. Yeah.
and the answer was it doesn't. It's basically stationary, I think.
Yeah.
So the part in the end where Mary Gay is just frozen in time in the stasis ship, is that what they call it?
Mm-hmm.
And that was moving at a very high percentage of the speed of light, so she would age very little. Yeah, that made sense, I think. So I expect all the based on the video that I watched the other day, so I expect everything else made sense. But I don't have enough of a physics background. I only have college level physics, so that I don't remember much from there.
One other thing that strikes me science-wise is, again, here's another future society with a very big reliance on drugs to manipulate, energy
Mm.
levels, all of that kind of stuff. The stim tabs earlier on. You obviously have, the ability to stay awake, etc. So again, pushing forward, this is mid-70s. We are now in the new century. I think drugs is a way to manipulate and manage mood, sexuality, all of that thing is very much a prevalent thing.
Yeah, they had counter drugs for addiction, so you could enjoy the thing without the addiction. Yeah, that
No, yeah, both
yeah.
the author and the character were a product of their time in that regard, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There was a whole lot of drug experimentations in the 60s he came out of. So doesn't surprise me that's in there at all.
Yeah, yeah. There was the part where he explains how his last name came about. I was just
Brilliant. Love that bit.
I did not see that coming at all. But also, I thought, just thinking about it now, it feels like a statement of what's been lost in the current version of the world, because you had so much diversity in culture that his parents could name something after. I think it's a Hindu thing, but I could be wrong. But
Mandela.
yeah, and his parents named something after a culture that that is far away from where they are, and now we've coalesced into this society with one consciousness. Uh, yeah, how do you guys feel about that?
Terrified.
Yeah.
I have a feeling, if anybody's interested in this, that our discussion of the last book of The Expanse will cover this in quite some detail, actually, because it's very much a big, massive theme of that book. But you're right, that somehow this is seen as advancement, is a far spread, a far flung truth from what I think a lot of us accepted as the kind of joys of life. The very differences between us are what makes life great, rather than actually conforming to one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. Yeah, the loss of individuality, I would think, would be a crime against humanity, actually. So I think we need
Yeah.
that.
But you can see how it could happen,
Oh yeah,
because I could be sitting here going, if only I had Jared's voice, my life would be improved tenfold. You know what I mean? If only I had his really wonderful accent or something, and people say, right, you can have that if you want, and So you can see how those like small things. It's the same with like prosthetics and plastic surgery, etc. There's deemed as improvements, but often the end result is something more monstrous than what was set out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the accent didn't help me at all, but the
It might help me.
But yeah, you just like mentioned prosthetics. Is it improvement or is it just different? And it's for everybody I think who has, it's just an adjustment. It's not necessarily an improvement in life. It's an adjustment, and then you hopefully improve your life in other ways. But that's another thing to think about with this book.
Yeah.
But also, did it happen because of the monstrous nature of the way that Earth evolved at the time? Because they could never get back to what Earth once was. I mean, by the time they had started to make changes, etc., at that point, society had broken down, food was scarce, the overpopulation, and they tried to control population, how they tried to do it. Like these governmental ideas or changes were coming in, and ultimately were making everything worse with every iteration that came around. So to the end that maybe people were just like, if we could just live in peace, or if we could just have enough to sustain us, and people will make small sacrifices along the way to that end, that we end up with an homogenous society. Was it a result of that, or was it really seen as progress? That is one of probably the big questions that you're left to come away with from that at the end.
It felt to me like Haldeman was almost making the point that this is inevitable in the evolution chain, because of something he said about torrents, that they had already evolved to being all clones of a single consciousness, and it felt like they were a slightly. My reading of that was that he was saying that they are a slightly more advanced consciousness. They had already evolved to that stage, and maybe it was war that precipitated the human evolution to that stage. But it sounded like he was saying that that's where we're all ending up. I thought that was the point he was trying to make, and I didn't. Well, I don't know if I agree, but agree is also not the right word. I don't know if that makes sense. I would. Um, and also another thing that I wanted to ask or discuss in that regard is the uniform consciousness said that uh, if things don't work out for this one, if they turn out to be not okay, they would just replace with a different consciousness. But who's making that decision? It's this person. Why would they ever make a decision to exterminate themselves, right? So that, I don't know if the inherent conflict in that was baked in, it's by design, or if it's just not really making sense in the plot.
That's a good point. I mean, the book is it is a warning against war.
Yeah.
And so the consequences of a forever war could lead to that single consciousness, which wasn't very well portrayed as a good thing in the book. So maybe that's his warning. That's his warning to the readers and stuff like that in society, basically.
Yeah.
You mean that it makes a society single-minded?
No arguments, no conflicts. Everyone in agreement. Yeah, it's
Interesting.
scary.
But also, what does this consciousness find to, like, where does it find the will to live on? Why would it, for instance, breed more humans? But I suppose you could make that argument about other hive consciousness in the animal kingdom. So, yeah.
But it is where's the purpose, and also that it took for all of this progress, and they've got the thing I've written down the book 3143 is the end date for a lot of this. It took a guy from the 20th century, from 1974, to point out that actually the flaw in the biology of having the single consciousness, and actually this would be a problem in we mightn't be able to see the problems with this for another 1,000 years, and by
Mm.
then, is it too late to fix, or what actually happens at that point? It's just like so that mind blowing. An awful lot, like the possibilities of an awful lot of this are far
Yeah.
reaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I find that to be a conceit in a lot of science fiction, where the modern person has the foresight to point out what's wrong with society, the way society is going, rather than the people who are living in the time. It's that happens quite a bit,
Yeah.
especially in time travel stories and stuff like that, but also in these kind of stories where the guy's way into the future from where his origins are, you know.
Mm.
It's not a new thing either, though. I think that's one of the reasons I'm keen to see Oppenheimer. You know, the movie, the Christopher Nolan movie, because again, nuclear technology has been around long enough that a lot of people just look to see the possible advantages of nuclear, but actually as a construct and conceit at the start of how whether we should be dabbling in this, those kind of ethical arguments all happen at
Oh, yeah.
that time rather than happening as much now, because it's kind of evolved past an awful lot of that. So if I would say anything about the current time that we're living in, and again how this novel's so relevant to now, we're sort of in this culture war, and that the idea that you question and you be well read and do all of, you know, don't just accept whatever government's going to take from you at the moment is very much the battle that's happening in Western society, I think, at the moment. You know, where some people are saying, no, the government's, you should always just listen to the government's always right, versus people are going, actually, no, I'm not sure that's exactly what we should be doing as a society. We should be having these ethical arguments. You should be questioning and asking for higher standards of people, etc. All that kind of stuff's going. But you're right. Like as a book, this is the most anti-war book or piece of fiction that I think I've ever seen, because it actually does take it through to all those eventualities. It doesn't just do a little microcosm. It kind of says, these are some of the things that could happen. And are you okay with that? Fine.
So the big reveal at the end that was just very casually thrown in, that the war, that the government basically lied, that the Torrens attacked first. Did that wasn't, it wasn't as much of a gut punch as it could have been, but I think that's possibly also by design. Maybe we saw it coming and it just sort of confirmed to us, but based on what we've seen of the Torrens, that they just have learned to fight from the first combat that we see on the ground. It didn't make a lot of sense that they would attack and for what reason. And so maybe it was just confirming the reader's beliefs at the end. What was it, a big reveal for all of you, or was it just, oh yeah, I thought that might be true?
No, I wasn't
You know,
surprised.
I thought,
Yeah,
yeah, I thought it was a nod to, you know, what helped get the U.S. into the Vietnam War was this
Exactly.
situation called the Gulf of Tonkin. I don't
Yep.
know if, yeah, Susana, you've heard of it, probably others have. So it was kind of the U.S. made an accusation that North Vietnam had attacked a U.S. warship or something.
Yep.
And that launched us into Vietnam. So I just wondered if it was a nod to that in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, it could have been. It was. I'm sure that was on his mind the whole, because you know, Vietnam was obviously on his mind when he's writing this. But the yeah, it wasn't a surprise at all to me that's how it ended up. And it ties into that theme of otherness that he creates. You know, these aliens are the other, and that's how the North Vietnamese were portrayed during the Vietnam conflict, was they're the other, you know. And that's very, like, the obvious theme in this book. And it's you're right, about pointing out the beginnings of the Vietnam War, very similar in that regards to the government was reacting to something that didn't happen, false information, and it just escalated from there.
Yeah.
And then as the war kept on going, does anybody remember what we were fighting for in the very first place? Like the origins of it, by the time, you've got a forever war here that's went on for millennia, essentially. They've been fighting for thousands of years, trying for territory, kind of doing the minutiae of war, without ever actually thinking, oh, why? Can anybody tell us? And he was there at the start, which I think is why him as a character is quite important, because if he wasn't there, those veterans weren't there, then does anybody even know or understand what war is for? Like, what is the point of war?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, it was just another aspect of life. It was, if you don't know any difference,
Yeah.
it's like
There
the
was.
weather.
Sorry. Go ahead, Susana.
No, I was done just having a little insight.
Sorry, I thought you were done. There was, the other thing that I thought was interesting that was that all the planets on which they attacked Torrens, it was with the sole purpose of extermination, because you couldn't establish human colonies there. There was no point to it other than let's kill some Torrens, which I thought was very interesting, because wars on Earth, you're probably fighting for territory, like you pointed out, Chris, or some other things. You have domination and then you get something out of it. And here it is just killing some people. You don't even know where their home planet is. If you did find it, you probably don't want to live there. There is absolutely no purpose to this other than killing Torrens for some made up purpose. So I thought that was really interesting, that to, I guess the point that it's trying to make is this is pointless. And that was very powerfully done with the space war.
I thought it was also very interesting that, you know, uh, Mandela was tagged as a pacifist by whatever psychological program examined him, but that he could still participate in the war because he had, like, psychologically, he saw the military as being responsible for the killing, not himself. So it's like the institution's doing it, not him as an individual. I thought it was really good how he portrayed that.
Yeah.
And that's why he was a great narrator. We were talking at the beginning that he was like a boring character.
Yeah.
It was the perfect character to tell the story, because I think he was truly as neutral as it was possible, and it was right in the middle of it, but it was still kind of outside, and he had no control over whatever decision, whatever's going to happen, no control over the time, his life, nothing. And he just moseyed along and did what he had to, and had a very resigned way to deal with things, to look at, but still optimistic and loyal, and doing what he had to do. So there were little gems of insight now and then that it was enough to carry on with all the narration, and you would get a lot just between the lines, because it was from his personality being so neutral. You could almost project any hypothesis. So it was a very well done character for that story.
Yeah, it was, the character seemed designed by Haldeman to have that kind of blank slate, so that the reader can be kind of the character as you're reading along, take in what he sees, but then, like we were saying earlier, create our own thoughts about what's going on there. And that's a common enough approach for POV characters, first person, to make them kind of that blank space that you can fill in your own thoughts and personality with the
But it's
character.
very hard to do, though. It's very hard.
I agree. No, he pulled it off. He pulled it off, and he definitely hit all the right beats with the story and the character's viewpoint to really make that a strong part of the book.
So apparently there are two more books in the same world, so to speak.
Oh,
And Forever Peace is, I think it covers the making of the hive mind, if I'm reading.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah. Forever Peace is a riveting portrayal of the effects of collective consciousness. So I'm hoping this, because I'm super interested in how that came about, and I like what they did with it in the book. But
mhm.
if we can get a story about that, and I think the third book, called Forever Free, is um, follows Mary Gay and
William.
William on the planet called Middle Finger.
Oh yeah, that's right. Little finger indeed.
Yeah.
Uh, can we talk just a little bit about the subversive nature in which he treats sexuality the whole way through the book,
Mm,
and there's kind of almost
Mhm.
this ping pong effect, of current times say that homosexuality is the abnormality, so to speak. Fast forward to when he goes back to the earth, and homosexual is encouraged, and some people are still heterosexual, etc. And that, again, here's another thing that he throws in there. Talk about use of pronouns has changed. He mentioned it in the book that the people were using collective pronouns of they, them, instead of he, she. Even at that time, I went like, wow,
mm,
what the
Yes.
hell?
yeah.
How does that go? To then cut forward much later, and it's this he's seen as the abnormality. Heterosexuality. There's a great line actually I've written down. Is that some of the doctors have an amused tolerance for heterosexuality? I thought that was just a great way to put that. But actually, sexuality, regardless of what political system or whatever's encouraged, people's natural underlying, sexuality still happens in private in all different ways, whether it's homosexual, heterosexuality, or otherwise. Even when, Lady, you were talking about when Diana gets drunk later on, and that a lot of them are talking about how, it's horrible, the idea of heterosexuality, but yet, even when she's drunk, you can say it's kind of sexual assault, but I also think there's an element of it that she wants to try it, or at least it's within her to kind of say that I can explore that under these conditions, that she can't talk about because it's seen as an abnormality. So, yeah, people are sent to be cured
Yeah,
from heterosexuality.
I thought of that
Well,
too. I thought of that too. That it. I think I felt like he was saying people are going to be people. People are going to do what they're going to do.
yeah,
Even though, just like the making of alcohol, the still that was going on. Um, and even when he was on Earth, he was saying, "Oh, I can probably find somebody to, some black market somewhere to buy what I want."
yeah,
But apparently on Earth, no. But on the ship, uh, people were, they had a still, they were making alcohol.
that's right.
Um, and at least in that example, they weren't following the directive about their sexuality. So, yeah, I think he was saying people are still going to be people. Yeah.
Yeah. But
And
uh,
they did have a baby at the end.
yeah.
So,
That's true.
oh,
uh, I think the point that he made about being other, the other way around, whatever is current is not adopted by the mainstream, becomes something to almost ostracize about. So they did claim tolerance, but they kept trying to cure him, and they kept, and we saw the mutiny in the end, which almost entirely was precipitated by his sexuality, right? So I thought that was a really interesting way to show,
Mhm.
one, that we have a tendency to other whatever is not mainstream, and two, and even if we like exactly just flip sides, and two, what is ridiculous about, I think, maybe in the 70s, about othering homosexuals at the time, perhaps. So yeah, I thought that was really well done too. I agree, Chris.
Even his mum, way the
Mm,
father's dead, and then
yeah.
she's living with a woman. You can sort of see his revulsion at that, and
Yeah.
it's not really explained with this revulsion to the fact that it's a woman or the fact that it's just not his father. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
But he leaves and can't even speak to his mum after that. You know, he just has to get, as one of his reasons for going back to war. You know, what is this world? You know,
Yeah.
and again,
Yeah.
that very strong allegory to people returning from the Vietnam War to kind of find themselves within trying to reintegrate themselves in the American society and go, well, who am I now? What kind of world have I come back to?
Yeah, that alienation that the people, that soldiers felt coming back from such a situation, was reflected very well in that those scenes with the mother and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of dislike.
He's got it all.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Say that again. Sorry.
I'm just saying he's got it all. I mean, he's covered so much. One thing I'm not sure if we talked about was the buying the gun at the mall, which is a U.S. thing. I know it's not all over the world. I mean, we're close to the mall. We're not in the shopping mall yet, but
pretty close.
pretty close. Yeah. So, I just found that fascinating as well. Yeah.
And the fact they sold heroin in bars. That was another thing that was in the book. So again, selling the malls, the guns in the malls, heroin over the counter bars is this kind of drug suppressant, or the rules, regulations, all that kind of stuff didn't matter. It was kind of needs must, whatever. In the kind of, because it seemed to be like people were paying for bodyguards. You couldn't travel about without a bodyguard, so a gun was like the most minor thing that you needed to carry about with you, especially one that can just rip people apart into shreds.
Yeah. And I thought that scene where he killed the boy was very well done. He was feeling guilty about killing Torrance earlier, but then he didn't have an emotional connection to the fact that he killed him. Like, it could be like killing an animal, for instance, if he let himself think that way about a spacefaring society. But here it is, he killed another human, and we delved into that. That was pretty well done. It was him, right? Or was it? It wasn't Mary. It was him. It was.
It was the girl who was getting raped, wasn't it? In the scene, and he saved her. And but for her stepping up is the only reason he got away with it, so to speak.
It just speaks volumes about the world that he came back to. That was okay, and he didn't even feel bad about it.
There was a line in that scene that did give me a knee-jerk reaction that I could not dissipate my anger out of. It was something to the effect of he got shot for taking something that most people would give freely. I thought that was a terrible way to phrase that. I did not appreciate it at all.
Sign of the times, maybe.
Yeah.
When he wrote it.
But again, this idea that they were fighting for Earth, and yet Earth had to be rebuilt in another place called Heaven. The Earth had become such an absolute shit show. Excuse the language. Is that they had to rebuild it somewhere else for somewhere to feel like this is what Earth is, or this is this idyllic place. Still rebuilt, which is crazy.
Can you remind me of that section? I don't remember that for some reason.
So
that
when
was in Heaven.
Yeah, Heaven. So when they lost their limbs, and they were given like active relief, they were put to, I think it's called Heaven. I think it's a lovely unspoiled Earth-like world. What Earth might have been like if the men had treated her with compassion instead of lust. I thought that was a great line. If men had treated Earth with compassion instead of lust. That they went and stayed there, and they used basically all their money to kind of go out and go for trips and eat well and do all of that kind of stuff.
And if I'm not mistaken, Heaven was also the place where all like the decisions were being made too, for the war and all that stuff. If I remember that correctly, that seemed to be like where, like you said, the soldiers would go to get limbs regrown or what have you, and but it also seemed to be where, because Earth definitely wasn't that place anymore. Like you said, it was. And what was the name of the planet that they made later with where the heterosexuals could go, basically?
Middle finger.
Middle finger. That's right. That's
Little
what it
finger. That's right. Okay.
was. Middle finger. Yeah.
Middle finger or little finger?
Middle.
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 Okay.
That one.
Yeah,
The bird. They should have called it the bird.
the bird. Bird Haven.
Little finger.
But it's kind of funny that he because that brings up another question about perception and like why is this place called heaven, and why the need to name it that, and
Yeah.
isn't the earth we live on supposed to be better? Aren't we supposed to approve that rather than just writing it off and making a heaven, and how does that, there's a lot of questions there.
Yeah.
The descriptions of heaven were really nice, how the cities were integrated and working with the ecosystem rather than trying to destroy it. I got the impression that might be why, it was too late to fix Earth, perhaps, and so they went to this other planet. But I really liked the descriptions of heaven. They were really pretty. I didn't like that they had to kill that big fish in the end, though. But
Well, I was thinking to myself, why is this thing not already dead?
Yeah.
And then, of course, about 3 paragraphs later,
Yeah.
it was no more. But I mean, again, not to say, in the Expanse floats a lot of these ideas as well. If you can travel anywhere in the world and you can travel to any other stars, why does one planet or one base become important then? If you don't like the place that Earth is, then you can just go somewhere else. And those kind of bigger ideas, obviously, we're not ready as a civilization for technologically or otherwise. But I think longer term, these are issues that will probably come up.
Yeah. Yep. Was there anything else to talk about? I'm trying to think if there's a lot that happened towards the end. I'm trying to remember if there was anything else to bring up.
Well, I'm really glad that there was an happy ending, because I was listening to the audiobook and it was just like 15 minutes left, and I was like, this is where it's gonna end. It's just, I thought you would just be deployed again and to be continued or something. So I think it was very well wrapped up,
Yeah.
in a romantic and optimistic way. But it was good to have that glimmer of hope for humanity and to see the character, finally settling down and hopefully be happy ever after. So I am a bit of a sucker for fairy tale endings in that regard, and I really enjoyed, and it's so neatly wrapped up just at the end. Very nice.
And I think the ending made sense. Like, it didn't feel rushed or not earned or anything, because the timeline of the story allowed for it. They arrived after being at the farthest reaches of the galaxy that they could have been, and came back, and they're like, yeah, cool, the war is done. It made sense, right, that they were gone for so long. So yeah, and I liked that they got back together with Mary. I would have liked to see her version of the war as well, and I believe there is a short story in Forever Free that gives us that. But yeah, I don't know, the book structure obviously doesn't allow for it, but I would have loved to hear what happened with her, other than besides I was not aging for 200 years.
I'll be the dissenting voice and say I don't really like the ending. It didn't
You
really fit.
didn't?
No, especially the first time. I actually didn't. I don't mind the happy ending, because you do like something good to happen at the end of the book, because it's kind of a bit oppressive the whole way through. But I remember that when I was saying about my first read through, one of my takeaways from the whole thing was, imagine living that, surviving at the end and realizing you had nobody else, you had no reason to live for. Do you know what I mean? I remember thinking that was such a big moment when I got to the end of him surviving that scene and then going, but to what end? Should he just have died at that end? And I think that was a really powerful statement that they could have made in that end. And then for him to come home, and the bit with the letter's lovely. Like, it's really, really nice. But I remember at the time going, it's just not quite as powerful as that could have been, in terms of like a statement to say, if there's no reason to live, or what are you living for? You know, the right to fight for life, etc., is one that's naturally inbred into all of us. But actually, at the end of the day, this bastardization of civilization and of humanity, is it something that's worth saving? I think would have been a much stronger and bigger thing. Now, on second time reading through, I was like, no, I'm happy enough with the kid, and you know that was good, you know that was fine. But I remember thinking like it fit much more tonally with the book if it hadn't happened.
Yeah.
So society should have been destroyed and then
Well,
start over or something.
I think that's the point. Is humanity worth saving at that point? Because I mean, humanity sort of didn't no longer exist. Certainly not the humanity that we all recognize in some ways. So did it survive? And he fought tooth and nail to live, and for enough of them to survive to say. But really, the realization should have been, and what now?
Yeah. Yeah. But isn't the point also that they weren't at risk of extinction from this threat, right? They, whatever humanity did to itself.
Self.
So he wasn't even really, if you think about it, fighting to protect humanity, because the Taurans didn't know where they were. All they had to do was not go near the collapser where they claimed the Taurans were. So yeah, I see your point about is humanity worth saving, but he wasn't also really saving. So at the end of it, it's just despair. If and for the character that we've been following, humanity is surviving and doing well with that single consciousness, apparently. So I would have had a very bad taste in my mouth if all he did was jump off a cliff at Stargate.
Yeah, like I say, I think on a reread, I was much more open to the fact that okay, this isn't quite as depressing. I'm actually quite sure that when he sent this to his publisher sent it back and went, "You need to put an ending on here."
Yeah,
that gives humanity some hope. It feels like a Hollywood focus tested ending rather than necessarily one that fit totally with the rest of the book. I would be interested to know.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would love to know what. Yeah, that sounds like, because it's so small. Maybe it feels almost like an afterthought. Yeah.
But I'm glad. Like Mary Gay seemed like a very nice character. They seemed like a very nice couple. It seemed like, you know, a lot of things that he was saying about, you know, if she had just been positioned with me, why were we split up in the first place? Like it's never made any sense in the first place that they were broken up like that. But
Yeah, that was also interesting that there was a line in there when they got separated and they got separate commands about how they thought years into the future, but absolutely gave no consideration to the humans involved, which is a very powerful statement.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the sequels delve more into the you know, the time dilation in the collective humanity thing?
The collective humanity, yes. I think the second book is probably all about that. If I didn't go back and read the premise after I finished the book. I only read it in the middle of it for some reason. But it says something about collective consciousness in the description.
Okay.
So I'm guessing it might be doing that. And the third one is about Mary Gay and William on Middle Finger and some other war that's probably happening. It is called Forever Free, though, so I think we'll get a even bigger bow tie at the end.
yeah.
Maybe.
But if you go off reading every books that are shoot-offs of the first series, we'll never make 15 years, Varsha. It's never going to happen.
No. These will be side quests. We are still doing the masterwork one at a time. Okay. Yeah, if you guys want to read that, I'm down for reading it together. But we'll still keep the 1 a month schedule for the SF Masterworks until we pick up enough. We can take a break for finishing some. Yeah. Cool. Anything else that we should talk about?
No, I've got lots of little things, like little notices, but like in general, the big stuff has been discussed, and like.
Yeah, cool. Then I guess we're ready to do outros. Jared, would you like to start us off?
Well, thank you for letting me like this book a little more than I originally did. um, and I'm Jared. I have the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and I'm also like to discuss stuff like this on with friends here on Page Chewing. And I also forgot to mention I am doing a little blog every week on the
Oh, that's right. So you are. Yeah.
pagechewing.com. So I always forget to mention that. uh, and that's it for me.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was great fun. Looking forward, well, the next one. It's going to be I Am Legend, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the next book in
I
the
Am
series.
Legend,
Yeah.
yes.
Don't need to read that one. It's already done. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, this has been great. If you want to check my channel, Den of the Weird, or you can find me anywhere online as Chronodendron.
Yeah, thank you. This was even better than advertised. Like I was positively giddy for the past couple of days, thinking, "Oh, I cannot wait to discuss this book. I just cannot wait." And it was even better than advertised. So thanks everybody for that. If you want to find me, you can find me at my channel, which is my name, Chris Mohan, Mohan, or you can find me at Page Tune Forums, or on probably somebody else on this lovely calls channel.
Yes, I had great fun with this. Sorry to drop in and out. But yeah, I can be found on Twitter, Page Chewing Forums, and just looking forward to the next one.
Yes.
Yes.
And thank you so much for watching. We, like everybody here said, you can find us on the Page Chewing Forum. If you would like to read the series with us or just pick and choose over the next 15 years, any books from the SF Masterworks, you can see the scheduling information on the Page Chewing Forum. Yeah, we'll see everyone again for a discussion of I Am Legend in about a month from now. Thank you so much. Bye.
Take care.
Bye bye.